Yo, what's up? It's your boy Big Cozy, Too Cozy with the Highly Advised Podcast. I'm here with my amigos, my big dog, Spence, Nigel. What's up, guys? We're doing the end of the year top 10 albums, the Highly Advised top 10 albums for all you listeners, for all you fans. Thank you. Hopefully you guys really fuck with this episode.
Yo, what's going on, everybody? It's Spence from the Highly Advised Podcast. You checking us out right now. We're about to do the year-end wrap up of all the albums of the year, so can't wait for you guys to hear what we got.
Relaxing Noji_Jackson. We are here. We figured that we bring this conversation to y'all. It's going to be a little interesting to hear, what everybody has to say about these picks that we had, that we came up with in this list, this end of the year, a little wrap up for music. How are y'all doing before I, go ahead and state the rules for the people that we use to come up with this?
Man, I'm good. I'm just excited to see what we got going on.
Yes, sir, man. I'm good too. It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood.
Okay. So we came up with some rules as to how we were going to go ahead and put this out for y'all. We pretty much have a list of albums that we put into a pool, and we chose from that pool to create a top 10 for each of us. Now, we all ranked those albums from 1 to 10. Number 1 getting 10 points, number 10 getting 1 point. So it's a little bit of a ranking system, and we combined our top 10s in order to make a top 10. Now, interestingly enough, we did not have enough consistency to get a full top 10, so we actually ended up rounding out to be like a top 7. So it's not going to be a top 10, but it's going to be our top albums of the year nonetheless. Now, I am the only one who have the answers. Nobody else knows yet, and I will be revealing as we get through the episode. But first, one thing we wanted to do was give a shout out to some people that, some unsigned hype as far as like what we saw as albums that maybe people didn't catch before we dig into this top 10. And I'll just start off. For me, I want to give a shout out to my boy Gilroy. He put out an album this year, 3 to 5. It's something that's good. People should listen to it. It's a little mix of it has a mix of a few different feels in there, but definitely just look it up. It's called 3 to 5. Gil Bit W is what he calls himself a lot. BB Diggler on YouTube. If you look on there, you'll see there's a lot of interesting songs, some familiar faces on there if you actually gonna listen to it. Lau or Spence, did y'all have a choice that y'all wanted to give to the listeners?
Yeah, I want to plug in my homeboy D'Angelo, my nigga Low. Definitely check out his motherfucking music. For the listeners, he goes by LEAUX. You know what I mean? If you're searching on DSPs, Spotify, Apple Music, et cetera, search him by that, and you'll see all his shit. So definitely check his ass out.
Yeah, for me, I have to go with a group actually local to Delaware called Cypher Click. They dropped the album earlier this year called Things Went Left. I definitely advise people to go check it out. Highly advise that you go check it out. And on top of it, like they're doing a lot of great things. I've seen them grow over the years, so I definitely would suggest checking it out. They're probably someone that you'll probably be hearing about pretty soon. So if you haven't got on the train yet, definitely advise to hop on it.
Yeah, definitely go and listen to all those albums. Lil Y, BB Diggler, BBDDIGGLER, and Cypher Click. They all put out good albums this year that you should listen to. And
Cypher Click, for just to make sure you guys know how to spell it, it's spelled CYPHERCLIQUE. CLQUE.
Yeah, if you have iPhone, it'll autocorrect it. So that's for all you Android users,
All right, so before I get into this list, I want to tell Lau and Spence the albums that did not make it into this top list. Lau, you put Fly God is an Awesome God, 2, Pray for Paris, the Versace Tape, and Only for Dolphins, and The Liz. None of those albums made into our top list.
Really?
Yep. Spence.
Yo, son, that's crazy. I knew I should have put that as an album.
Spence, for you.
I switched Fly God out too. That's crazy.
Spence, for you. From a King to a God did not make it, and neither did Savage Mode 2.
What?
Neither of those albums made it. And for me, I'm not surprised that No Pressure didn't make it. I know y'all hate Logic. Surprise, surprise. Who would have thought, right? But neither did New Beginnings or King's Disease. So neither of those albums made it. And now
New Beginnings is Reason, right?
Reason.
Yeah, I liked Reason's album also. I thought about that, but the list was just it was such a good list to pull from. So
Yeah, there's a lot of good music that came out this year.
I'm interested now. Let's rock and roll now. Shit.
okay.
that's crazy. Fly Guy 2 didn't make it.
Yeah, I'm surprised, nigga.
Yeah. Hey man, like when but you know what though? When I'm looking at the list now, I'm like, I get it because like our tastes are different, and I had a feeling that this would happen, you know. So this is kind of interesting. So in number 7, go ahead, you're good.
I was gonna say, I ain't even gonna hold you because when it comes to the list, because Fly Guy 2, I would have put there. I would have put Fly Guy 2 in my stuff, but my thing was with Westside, I only was giving him one project.
You know,
out of
and
everything.
I felt the same way.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
But if we're gonna, I feel like a consensus has been formed. I think we could just put that as an honorable 8, just cause.
Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah.
That's fair enough. That is an honorable 8 for sure because that's a good album. But I also like didn't want to put 2 West Side in there. I didn't want it to be like Griselda list. You know what I mean? So there is that. So let's just, you know, as an honorable 8, shouts out to, you know, West Side. But in number 7 with 4 points, we have Broken Window of Opportunity. Sir Michael Rocks.
Okay.
Good album. Trying to Hide was one of my favorite songs of the year. I'm not gonna lie to y'all. Like that's Trying to Hide, and I think it's Overboard, if I'm not mistaken, is the name of the song, or Overload.
Oh, I thought you like Punch It In.
Nah, you know, that song is actually not that bad. Yeah, I was about to say that song's not that bad. I like Art Show too. I fuck with that song. I listen to that song all the time.
Yo, man, he rebounded. Like I was about to say, rebounded. He redeemed himself with that fucking album. Because if anybody's been listening to Michael Rocks like we've been for the past few years, the nigga, he started out very strong and he started putting out fucking garbage. And you know, Mikey Rocks, if you listen to this, shouts out to you. But we just being honest fans, you know what I mean? Like, we was a fucking with Popular. Part 2 is just fucking garbage.
Yeah, it's not my cup of tea.
Funds and Access, I don't even know if many people know about that shit. So it's just when he did Broken Window, it was kind of like, wow, this is a breath of fresh air of breath of fresh air of what we've been hearing prior to that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when it came to this album, I definitely agree because one thing being a long-term fan of Sir Michael Rocks or Mikey Rocks, whatever you know him as, he did start off very, very strong in the early 10s, and then he kind of started fading off when he changed his style or whatever. But listening to this album, like we were able to get like you recognize from the beginning that this is a conceptual album, right? Whether it's the conversation that he's having to someone that did him wrong, where it's like you could tell this isn't like a fictional thing. This is something that is real, right? On top of it, where to me, I'll always say this, and it's probably never really been said about Sir Michael Rocks, but he's probably like the father of scam rapping, just because.
You know, I'll give you that. I'll give you that.
If you listen to like a lot of his early music, it was nothing but scamming, right? But we just didn't understand. If you weren't from an area, you wouldn't understand it. So like even listening to this, like he still follows that that mode of speaking on scamming or whatever, whether it be how to make money, X, Y, and Z, and then having the story of like Trying to Hide. So to me, it was a really impressive album that let me know like, hey, if this guy is putting out music like this now, I know we might be in for something very promising within the future, because I'm not sure if you guys saw, but there was a moment in time, probably a couple earlier this year, he was complaining after releasing the album, I believe, of him not having any connections. He not having connections, or all his old connections weren't really fooling with him anymore. He was claiming he was blackballed from the industry. So.
And a lack of marketing too, is what he said about this album. And
yeah,
I think this album definitely didn't get the shine it deserved. But I mean, like, I'm honestly very happy that it's in our top list, because like there's enough good songs on here to where it's like, okay, like you should give it a listen if you're a fan of Sir Michael Rocks. Like, so I fuck with it. And shouts out to us for putting it on there. It means we all have good taste.
Yeah, and I'll say more about Mikey Rocks later on because there's something that connects him later on in this list.
Also, off of Funds and Access, the song Bull Market is a shit. I fuck with that song. The song's really good. But
I never listened to Funds and Access, bro.
it's
Like
not good. But that
Yeah,
song is
don't,
good.
I
don't
know
waste your
because
time.
I remember listening to SeaWorld and
That
like
was off of Populaire.
that.
Or no,
Oh
was that?
No, that was off of
no,
Banco.
Oh yeah, you're right.
yeah.
It's off of Banco.
Yeah, because like that, even that album wasn't that promising. Like, so hearing what he has now, I think we should be in. I think we should be in better hands. I just hope he focuses. Like, he doesn't spread himself too thin, just because of like everything that he's doing. Like, if you pay attention to his social media, if I think if he just focuses on the music itself after hearing this album, and he just says, "Yo, listen, I just got to go hard and push this." I think we'll be hearing a lot more from Mikey Rocks from other people next year
I hope
in
so.
2021.
I I hope so too. My last take on him is just, hopefully not necessarily get all the old people back, but hopefully he can find some new light in the rap game where, people are going to be more aware to his music and shit. Not his popular nonsense, but from this album moving forward. And hopefully he continues rapping the way he did on this album and not fucking popular shit. I'm not a fan of that shit.
All
Yeah.
right.
Oh, and before we get out of here, mentioning my unsigned hype earlier with Cypher Click, they actually have a single with him called, I think it's called
Cobra Kai.
Cobra Kai.
Shouts out
Cobra
to that
Kai.
song. That song's dope.
Yeah, that song
Yeah.
is dope. So shouts out to them.
Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully we can see something with Mikey Rocks and Boldy James coming together again. So
Word. So for number 6, we have a tie. Surprisingly enough. Now, this is interesting. The tie is between, with 5 points, Dark Lane demo tapes and a written testimony.
Ooh.
It's interesting. Me personally, I would put a written testimony over Dark Lane demo tapes, but that is just me.
why is that?
Because I think so. A conversation I've been having recently is, just thinking about Jay-Z's collab albums and seeing as to where this one falls. I still haven't came up with an answer for that question, but what I will say is that I think there's enough songs on here that, especially the Neverending Story, which is one of my favorite songs of the year, easily. To me, this album, the rapping on it, like the production, like everything, to me, other than maybe a couple songs, is something that should be listened to by everybody, especially if you're a fan of Jay-Z, a fan of rap, you know what I mean?
Well, here's the thing though. That'll come down onto basically opinion then. You think that everybody should listen to it. I mean, granted, this whole thing is subjective anyway.
Of course.
But I think that the Dark Lane demo tapes has more replay value to it. You know what I mean? And
I
that's
disagree.
why that's why I would put that over a written testimony. And I know sometimes when it comes to rap music, the general consensus doesn't mean it's the right consensus.
Mhm.
But I feel like a lot more people is fucking with a Dark Lane demo tapes than a written testimony. But I'm not saying written testimony is garbage. Obviously not, because we put it in here and it's one of the top albums of the year. It's just that if since we have a tie, I'm giving the edge to Drake on this one. The last thing I want to say about it is on Dark Lane demo tapes, there was only one or two songs that I was like, okay, I really don't care for this shit. But the other songs on there, I'm like, I can hear every song everywhere. I feel like it's I feel like to listen to testimony, you have to have a certain taste of music to listen to that shit. While Dark Lane demo tapes is a lot easier on the ears for maybe somebody who's not into rap like we are.
Right. Yeah. I mean, for me, on my top 10 list, I had Dark Lane demo tapes at number 9, and I had written testimony as number 10. So I have to co-sign you with there, where I have to put Dark Lane demo tapes over it. Granted, I'm the biggest fan of it, and anybody that listens to the podcast has probably heard me express my feelings on it. But I do take into consideration how well an album has aged within a year, because that lets me know a lot. It tells me a lot more about how good this album was. And I only picked it every so often. It wasn't bad, but it was much easier on the ears in comparison to written testimony. I do hold it a huge factor is how artists can survive on their own on an album. And to me, this was like a Jay-Z Jay Electronica project, a duet, pretty much essentially. But in the same vein, I would still listen to it if Jay-Z wasn't on the album, but I know I wouldn't listen to it as much. I feel like Jay-Z was someone that was a strong carrier of someone's first album, which to me I had to take some points away from it. It had a lot of great lyricism. It had the songs that you felt like, hey, I can listen to this and connect it to my life. The lyricism's there, the production as well. But in the same breath, it's just when I'm listening to it, it's like it is way more complex than listening to something from a older act where it's just bar on bar on bar. It's like you literally have to go and
Google it.
yeah, you have to Google it, which is good.
Yeah.
But I think to some capacity, it's just like
That doesn't
dude,
make for the best listening experience.
exactly. And I think, and I'm a person that loves lyricism, but to me, I was just like, yo, Jay Electronica, he came out with a really good album. I won't say great in comparison to Dark Lane demo tapes. Drake threw something out, a couple of songs I didn't care for, but it sounded good. It was cohesive, and it's still, you could tell it was something that Drake was pushing forward in terms of sound, similar to like if you're reading This Is Too Late.
Yeah, for me, I didn't put Dark Lane demo tapes in my top 10. I'm not gonna lie to y'all. It didn't make it.
Right.
Like I mean, for me, like, it was a cool Jake project, but it wasn't like something where I was like, you need to listen to this over everything else. But I mean, 2C Side was cool.
Yeah. I
Like,
mean, come on, yo.
nah, all right, let me stop. Let me stop
Nigga.
hating. Let me stop hating. Let me stop hating. No, it's a good
Yeah.
project. I just like it. To me, it just didn't match the other albums that I put onto my list. Not to say that it's bad. Like, I'm sure there's no reason to not listen to it because there's good songs on there. It's actually like a really good sounding project. But for me, like, it just didn't make it into my top 10, and that's just where it is.
Yeah, like I
So,
mean, to me, I can understand. I just think with Drake, I think with Drake, he's able to illustrate a certain lyricism
mm,
that is simplistic, but it's not overly complex, but it's complex enough that you can relate to it without like, oh, the thinking process is less about the bars itself and more about your connection to it in some instances. Like
okay.
I think Drake's album would have been a lot bigger had we been able to be outside. So
All right. Well, so at number 5, we have Detroit 2 with 13 points. Good album. This
as
is
it
probably, yeah, this is
should have
probably
been
Drake.
higher
Well,
for me.
in my opinion, I'll agree with you on that one because of what I see. But it's one of the projects, like I said before when we spoke about it on the podcast. I think it's Big Sean's best project. There's a lot of listenability. Like, definitely he hits on. I think Big Sean does everything he does well, but does it the best cohesively on this project. And
Absolutely.
another a $10 word for y'all is euphonious, and that's like aesthetically pleasing to the ear. This album has a lot of that, but also, Big Sean's lyricism shines through on songs like Lucky Me, you know what I mean? Which is like the perfect song for the gym. Then he has other songs on, like, Big Sean hits all the bases on this album. He really does. And he
Yeah.
has the posse track towards the end.
Yeah. I mean, I think honestly, the one song that took me the hardest to warm up to was probably that Friday Night Cypher, which was a posse cut,
Mhm.
just because Detroit has like their own sound, which I'm still having a hard time adapting to.
I thought Sada
Listen
Baby
to
was your favorite rapper.
so like I was
No
saying,
comment.
right? So like they have a very interesting sound, right? Outside of that, the album was to me, to me, I struggle not putting this as my number one album of the year, personally.
Really?
Just because I like you said, I think this was a full album by Big Sean for one. Secondly, outside of it being just a full album, it was just the way he was able to cohesively get his message across through every song while highlighting what I think is the best parts of Big Sean, where it's more of like a positive rapper, but not in the not in the Mickey Mouse way or whatever, not in the cookie cutter way of like other artists I don't want to name. But yeah, to me, I think Big Sean was just he was able to do everything perfectly. And then you have a song like Deep Reverence, where we all know half the time when an artist passes away, unfortunately, like Nipsey Hussle, their verse is typically always is inflated, right? Not
Mhm.
just saying Nipsey Hussle's in particular, but typically you feel the verse a lot more because the person's no longer here. So with this album, even that song, I felt like Big Sean did a better job. Like I think he did a better job than Nipsey on that song and a lot of songs overall. And we got 2088 on the song. So
So I'm gonna be honest. I didn't put it in my top. It was in my top 10 earlier in the year. Then I dropped it. And one of the criticisms I had on this album, and I'm gonna set the record straight. It is a good album. I'm not gonna sit there and say it's a bad album by any stretch of the imagination, but I felt like the album was really long. Maybe my differences from your guys is maybe I've been spoiled by shorter albums because I noticed there's been quite a bit of shorter albums released this year. And I don't know if that's because artists is in a rush to put out projects so they don't have, lengthy albums. But that was probably like the longest rap album of this year, out of popular artists, at least rap artists. Outside of that, I don't think the album is bad at all. It's not, but it was just long, and that's kind of like what it kind of made me like, damn, I don't know if I want to put this in my top 10. And maybe that's an unfair criticism of placing it in the top 10, but that was just for me. You know what I mean? Like I feel like I could listen to 10, 12 songs and then I'm like, damn, I'm done now. I
Yeah.
want to listen to something different.
right. So like let me ask you this then. So was there like a song that you didn't like off of the album per se? Like were there song like granted, because I know when you have a longer album, there's a higher probability of putting out bad songs, right?
Right.
Right.
So were there songs that you didn't care for as well, or is it just the length of the album that like really pulled you away?
Well, I'm not going to sit there and say that every song was, hardcore hitting to me, but there wasn't one song where I'm like, this is trash or like, oh, I don't really give a fuck about this. It was just that it was just like, damn, like, all right, man, I made it like halfway through. I'm kind of just done listening to this. You know what I mean?
Mm,
And that's why I was like, no, I want to put my top 10 because I know for me personally, I'm like, I know I'm not going to listen to this every day because of how long it is, versus another album where it might be just 30 minutes long or, believe it or not, guys, there's been like 20-minute albums, which is fucking crazy, where I could
yes.
I could sit there and just listen to in one setting. You know what I mean? And like I said, maybe it's not the biggest criticism, but that's just my opinion on it. Kind of like when Nigel's opinion was like, hey, look, it's more pleasing to my ears versus somebody else's ears. And I think that everybody should listen to it. That's just his opinion. You know what I mean?
Right.
Whether you
Right.
think it's fair or not. And that's just my opinion of the Big Sean album. Me personally, though, I did like the Friday Night Cypher. Um, I really, really enjoyed motherfucking Boldy James part, but also like Payroll Giovanni's part on there as well. Those were two like standout parts of that fucking song. So I
Mm,
I enjoy. I'm a guy. I enjoy posse cuts, especially when you have more good artists than not on the posse cut. Cause it kind of reminds me of like, what's that big De La Soul song that they did back in the day? It was a remix, but it was a posse cut that had Busta Rhymes on it and other fucking New York rappers. I like good posse cuts. 3 6
right.
Mafia, they always had posse cuts and shit like that.
Yeah, they were
So
good for that. Well, I mean, for me, like I think the perfect album is between I would say like 40 to 50 minutes. But I think because of the content on there, like if the songs weren't good, then I'd be like, okay, like, maybe could have cut this or cut that. That was actually one of my issues with No Pressure, like Logic's album. Like it's a really good album, but he could have easily took away like 3 or 4 songs, in my opinion, and the album would have been better. One of my favorite parts of Big Sean's album, though, was when Stevie Wonder said he saw a piano for the first time, and I thought that was actually pretty hilarious. So, like, I mean, like to me, that gives him extra points as to where he should be in the top 10, of course.
Mm, yeah. I mean, I think, I mean, there's always this whole thing about Stevie. that is a hard sell. That is a hard sell when it comes to like an album. Like, yo, you got Stevie Wonder saying like he actually saw some shit. Like, I could understand that. Like, it's hard not to put in your top 10. But like for me, I will say this, like when it comes to like album length, I've always been vocal. Like I think for me, 50 to an hour is fine, right? 45 to an hour, hour 5, hour 10 is fine for me. It all for me, it really depends on the story of an album, right? And I think that's why I really was debating on putting this album as number one. And this album, though it is like an hour and 14 minutes, probably a little less than that if you take out the video and the skits. When you take out the video and the skits, it's probably like 55 minutes or so. But my thing when it came to this album was the way he was able to position the skits of Erica Badu talking or Dave Chappelle talking or Stevie Wonder, or I think he might have had like his father or somebody like that on one of the songs at the back of one of the songs. It was to me, I just felt as though it was like the perfect way of him illustrating himself, his personality, and like his influence of someone like of pretty much legends, Stevie Wonder, Erica Badu, Dave Chappelle, all
Right.
coming from different eras, different walks of life, and all the things they have positive to say either to Big Sean or advice they would give to Big Sean, right? So to me, I think that was a thing that helps when you have a longer album because you see it in these shorter albums, but it's harder to find it where you're getting a story. Like you're as soon as I press play, I know I need to listen to the whole thing because I'm on a journey. And I think that's what I got. I got more of that in this Big Sean album than like a album that may be like 35 minutes. So it actually compared to most of the albums that came out this year. So that's really my response when it comes to like length and for when I don't have a problem when the album's actually a little longer. But I can understand where you're coming from though with that, Lau.
All
You
right.
kind of just want to play and just be out. So
So for number 4, before we get into the top 3, we have "Who Made the Sunshine" by West
Yeah.
Side Gun
I think
with
you know
17 points. Sorry.
it's crazy how we did the scoring and all that because I think me and Spence we kind of agreed that well, I don't know. I think Fly God Tune was a better project than Who Made the Sunshine, but it seemed like Who Made the Sunshine was more complete
yeah.
out of the 3 projects he dropped this year. And I don't know if that's because Shady had some oversight over it or it's because, West Side really, I guess he wanted to do it differently. But he said he made this fucking album like in a week, which is fucking crazy to me. You know,
Yeah.
I liked Who Made the Sunshine. It was obviously in our top tens. But the problem I had with Who Made the Sunshine compared to his other 2 albums is all the songs have features except for one. And the one song that he doesn't have a feature, it's like a 1-minute song. And I had a problem with that because I'm kind of like this album, even though it's good, it reminds me more of a compilation of artists together than versus West Side Gun himself. So I was a little surprised when the other 2 albums didn't make it, but this one did.
Me personally, to me, this album is the better one out of the 3 albums that he put out this year. I don't mind the feeling of it feeling like a compilation because, like, I feel like even on Fly God 2, we can even put Pray for Paris in there. Like, some of the best verses on there were in West Sides. You know what I mean? I think the production on this album is the best out of the 3. I think the verses are the best out of the 3. I think the way it's sequenced is the best out of the 3. I think West Side not rapping a lot doesn't hurt at all because even West Side knows he's not the best rapper. You know what I mean? So like, it's one of those things where, to me, it's okay because I think where West Side really shines is his ability to put shit together, not his rapping ability. If it was based off of rapping ability, this will probably be even further back on my list. But because it's an album and the way it sounds as an album, I put it relatively high on my list because as an album, it sounds really good.
Yeah, that's where I was leaning towards as well. Where like I kind of had like a collective of both of your thoughts. as a project, because I one thing I did when before making my list, I kind of did the battle of albums, right? Of hey, I like this. I think this is here. This should be here. This should be here. But let me see where these two compare in comparison to one another. And actually, my original list, I actually had this as number 4. Um, Similar to what Lau said, it does feel like it's more of a compilation album because you have just it's heavy with features. But in the same token of breath, like Nigel also says, it's a complete, and even Lau says it's a complete album, which is where it's this confusing thing of the lyricism is enough lyricism there, but it doesn't outweigh pretty much the majority of the whole list that we have, right? But at the same time, it's all the other intangibles outside of the lyricism that actually helps push it up further. Because I at one point when going through the albums, just saying listening to the bars themselves, I'm like, this may be like number 8 for me. But when you take into account production, which is probably one of the best produced albums this year, you take in the way West Side approaches the album, like he said, is art. So he's putting the right people where they need to be to make the best cohesive sound.
That's a
which
skill.
Is exactly, that's not something that an artist is easily able to do, to just to be able to listen and say, hey, I want, and remind you, he's only doing this in a week's time. So to be like, yo, let me hit up such and such. They would sound good on this. They would sound good on this. I want them on this part. And I'm going to just come through and kind of just do a verse that's good, but not better than the people that's on my album. So I, because of that, I had to put it at 4. And I agree that it can be at 4 just because of this completeness. But it kind of goes back to it does go back to the thing with Jay Electronica that I said of how Jay-Z carried, to me, I felt like Jay-Z carried Jay Electronica on his album. With Westside, like I think he had projects that may have sounded a little better, but he does get carried. I think on all his projects, I think he's getting carried on all of his projects that he's put out this year, which
Exactly.
is like is a huge downside, because had if his lyricism, if he was lyrically better than every feature he had, he probably could have been in competition for number 1. He
See,
was number 1 at one point for me.
but my
He-
question is, does he mind? Does he mind that he doesn't have the best verses on his albums? Because I would have to say he doesn't. Like, I'm
No.
He doesn't, but the listener may.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, I agree with Spence on that. Like, I think it's evident where he's kind of like, I happen to be a rapper that's able to get dope ass producers and dope rappers on my shit, but I'm like more of an A&R than a fucking artist. He
Right.
I just happen to fucking rap, and I happen to do it better than fucking Diddy. You know, like that's him. I like Who Made the Sunshine. The reason why I like Fly Guy 2 a little better, because you hear more of him than Who Made the Sunshine, you know? And that was just like my only gripe with that shit. I was like, damn, you don't hear him as often, but the nigga knows how to put a fucking album, project, whatever you want to call it these days, together real nice. You know what I mean? But what does hold him back is like the nigga isn't, you know, his rapping isn't top tier, you know. West Side is obvious. I don't think West Side is garbage, but like, you know, compared to his family members, Benny and Conway, he's, you know, he can't hold a candle to him. And he knows that. And you know what I mean?
He's open about that.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
really open about that shit. That's just my problem with Who Made the Sunshine. It's more of everybody else than him, but it's supposed to be him. But that's just, you know, once again, it's my opinion. Maybe another listener might be like, I love that about West Side, you know.
When it comes to West Side, though, right? Do you feel as though like we may have seen, because I think West Side over the years he's been consistent with putting out good material. Do you think we've seen the best of West Side up until this point, or do you think there's more to be seen from him just because of putting out 3 albums, possibly a 4th at the end of this year, and then on top of it, like he knows how to illustrate, he knows how to A&R by putting the right people together, but with the lack of lyricism, do you feel as though there's more to come from him, or have is it possible that we may have seen like his peak and he may just be riding this out for a while?
I so with that, it's hard with somebody like him, because I listened to his shit back in 2018, 17, and shit like that. And really, the nigga, he said it himself in the Joe Budden interview. For those who watched that interview, you know, he's rapped the same. It's like the only thing different is the fucking beats and maybe how he put together a project. I feel like this is definitely the most recognition and awareness and popularity he's gotten this year. Absolutely. But to say like his fucking career may be over, I think he's gonna be consistent on the way he sounds. And I think if he drops, let's say he drops 2 projects every year, 2 or 3 projects every year, I don't think it'll be like, oh, he needs to hang it up, because he's pretty consistent the way he fucking sounds. Will he reach the popularity height of 2020? I mean, we don't know. We may 2021, he might have another spike. We just don't know, because I feel like this is the first true year where motherfuckers is really recognizing him in the rap game. You know what I mean? Like, yes, 2018, 2019, people knew who he was, but 2020 was like, oh shit, this is a Griselda year, et cetera, et cetera. I think it's right now. I don't want to say he's hitting his peak or whatever like that. I think that we could still get another good year or two out of him. But that, you know, that's also depends if the motherfucker, if this album he said he's going to drop next is his last one or not. Because apparently Pray for Paris should have been the last one. And what do you know? 2 projects later.
Yeah, which is kind of crazy. So I mean, I can agree to that. Like, I think we may not have gotten the best from him, but I think we're pretty close to it, just because of I'm sorry, like he has that unique talent of being able to do whatever he wants to do for 50 weeks out the year, and then the last 2 weeks, hey, let me record some great albums. But I do think, like, with that understanding, I think his ceiling is going to be hard, because when you're putting out that much music, and then we're literally having a conversation. We had a conversation of, yo, he put out 3 albums and possibly a 4th this year, and we're only going to pick one. All of us are all under this unwritten agreement of picking one album. So because of that, like, I think he can dilute himself somewhat, and just because you're spreading yourself out so thin to putting 2 or 3 albums out. So I'm curious to see what happens, but I do think him releasing as much as he does I think it may be beneficial for him next year, but I think after that we're going to have a different conversation when it comes to him, because I think he'll have to do what like a UFC fighter does, fight a lot, and then once you become champion, only fight once or twice a year.
So before we get into the top 3 albums, we wanted to go ahead and give our honorable mentions for albums that we thought might not make it onto the top 10 at all, but albums that we considered to be really good this year.
Honorable mention to me is, I think we might have different opinions of it, but like for me, I don't necessarily think this is a top 10 album, but it's an album where I'm like, look, I enjoyed listening to this, and I would definitely recommend other people to listen to it. Not necessarily for you to be like, yo, this is the greatest shit I heard, but it's going to be like, hey, it's a vibe. And you know what? It's not that fucking bad. I could listen to this. And to me, it was the Larry June project. Keep going. You know, with Harry Fraud, producing all the beats, I enjoyed it, man. I thought it went well. Of course, if you listen to Larry June, you know the nigga's not the best rapper. You know what I mean? You know you're not gonna get like, oh my god, his lyricism is blowing me a fucking way. But like, if you sit in there, you're chilling, you're smoking, drinking, and hear shit playing in the background, motherfuckers are gonna be like, you know, they're gonna be nodding and like, yo, this is all right. You know what I mean? And then move along with whatever's going on at the event.
He's gonna say numbers.
And yeah, he's gonna say numbers, all that shit. So yeah, shouts out to Larry June. Shouts out to Harry Fraud. Yes, good job, Larry.
Yeah, I that the Larry June project, I didn't even think about that one as my honorable mention, but he definitely deserves his right of being mentioned, because he just, similar to what we were talking about with Westside, he put out like numerous projects this year. So shout outs to Larry June. Actually, one of my low key favorite artists from since the beginning of, since the late last year. But for me, I would have to go with it was a hard decision, but I wanted to keep it more rap because I was gonna go with Back Home by Trey Songz initially. But when it came to rap, I really had to say to myself, I was like, I had to pick this rapper named Kerr out of Philadelphia the album's called Shouldn't Be Like This. Similar to your criteria when it comes to honorable mentions, like it was an album that I listened to. It came out probably like in October or September, not too long ago. And I played it just because it's an artist I'm familiar with and he delivers on almost every song. There's a lot of stuff that still needs to be shaping up around him in terms of just molding his sound a little bit better. But just from that introspectiveness that he gives you on certain songs to like even he had a song like Yeezy Slides, which is is one of my favorite songs as well as La Brea. He just knows how to deliver his message. It's just a matter of what's to come next. Because I think this is a project that if he was able to be outside, he would have a better chance at being a little bit more face front to people just because of being able to be outside X, Y, and Z. So this was a good album. I definitely would suggest in my honorable mentions, it would be Kerr. It Shouldn't Be Like This. Definitely suggest, highly advise that you check it out.
Shouts out to Kerr.
Shouts out to Kerr, man. For me, the album that I chose was, and the album title is super long, so I'm just gonna call it The Attack of the 85 by Silk Money with a $ for Silk. If you guys are familiar, Divine Council was a group that was out, maybe like a few years ago, and Silk Money was one of the standout rappers from there. I've been following his solo career since then, and he's put out a few projects, but I would say that this is the project that I've listened to the most. Now, the reason why I didn't put it in my top 10 was because I don't think this album is one that everybody's going to listen to and be like, oh, this is the shit, similar to what everybody else has said. Actually, and on the contrary, I think a lot of people will listen to this album and probably not like it because of the way he's actually rapping and his beat selection. It's not something that's mainstream at all. His style of rapping, like what he's actually rapping about, like it's interesting. Definitely good, definitely different, definitely an acquired taste. And it's one of those things where I feel like you should listen to it and just make a decision for yourself as to if you like it or not. And if you do, then I fuck with you. Or if you do listen to it and you don't like it, then I guess it kind of is what it is. But it was one of my favorite projects from the year just because of how he rapped and his lyricism. Shouts out to Khalil Blue because he did a lot of the production on that project that I just mentioned. So are you guys ready to hop into the top 3 albums projects of the year?
Before we jump into the top 3, here's a bonus question for you niggas. I'm gonna bring her back 3 years ago. One album I'm gonna mention. Do you think it's honorable mention or top 10? Year 2017. The album Die Lit. Is it honorable mention or is it top 10?
Jesus,
it's basura. It's trash. The album was, man.
Look, man, Lean for Real is actually a pretty dope song. That might go on my gym playlist. So, I mean, shouts out to Playboy Cardi. Honorable mention for me.
Man, toilet for me.
All right, you guys ready to jump into this?
Yeah.
All right. So, number 3, The Price of Tea in China with 21 points.
Wow.
Yes.
That made it to 3?
It made it to 3.
Wow.
So I knew this album was going to be highly ranked, but I was just like, because it's a good album. Before, other albums came out, I was just like, this could be number 1 because of the production, the rapping, like especially the first song, the way that song hits, man. Like, look, like there's a lot of good things that could be said about The Price of Tea in China, from the features, everything. Alchemist did his thing. It's been a big year for Alchemist. Shouts out to Alchemist, like, because this year has been very good for him. This album is pretty much a straight through ride, man. Like, I don't really have anything bad to say about it. There's like one song that I do not like, and I think it's called Running, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh yeah,
you didn't like that song?
No,
Running. I liked it. It was cool. I fuck with it. Man, this album was slept on. When this album dropped, it dropped right before the whole pandemic took over America. You know, I remember playing this joint in the whip, and Seho, he was riding with me, and we was up to no good. You know what I mean? And
Shouts out to Seho.
and he a diehard Drake fan, so he wasn't trying to hear it. But I'm like, bro, you need to open your eyes. He's talking about the shit that you went through. You know what I mean? I mean, like that kitchen shit, that front porch shit, niggas. You know
Yeah,
when you
okay,
when you when you clutching on your waist because real definition of situation gang. Spence he knows. So
you're a trip, yo.
but like I thoroughly enjoyed The Price of Tea in China. Boldy James, if I'm not mistaken, you guys could correct me. I think that was his first project back in years. And when he dropped that, I was like, oh shit. I feel like you could hear what he's trying to rap. You can hear the pain in his shit. You can hear like, yo, I've been struggling, but I'm still making my way. Like, you know what I mean? I'm still gonna get it in. Fuck it. If I'm serving fiends or rapping, blah, blah, blah. Like I fucks with Boulder James. And even though he's a rapper from Detroit, the nigga gives me real New York vibes. And I don't know if that's because of the Alchemist beats or not, but Boldy James, man, I salute to him. That was a great album.
Yeah, it was definitely a great album. Like you said, it came out earlier in the year, right before COVID hit, and it from the first time I played it, I knew it was something special. Like how he starts off the album with Caruth, which is like a crazy title in itself because it's about well, the title's named after Ray Caruth. Um, but it's the album in itself was just kind of crazy because I think he did put out something last year, but I think it might have been
Oh,
a short
you're
EP
you're right.
though.
The Boldface joint. Yeah, I forgot about
Yeah,
that. It was like 5 songs. Well,
yeah,
Alchemist.
yeah.
Yeah.
But
This year?
apparently, last
No,
year.
it's last year.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, his first mixtape was done by Alchemist, right?
Yeah, my first chemistry set.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like from listening to this, like I think the one thing that really helped it stand out the most for me was just the production itself. Because of someone like Alchemist, granted the lyricism is there, but the production of Alchemist is just such a standout here where especially when you take into consideration this was like one of the first projects Alchemist produced this year. So like it set the tone for what the year would become for Alchemist for one. And granted, I don't want to attach too much of this album to Alchemist per se, but when listening to this, you were able to feel like, oh, it's similar to what you said, that 90s rap music or that New York sound of the way he's riding the beat, which is just unimaginable when you hear the type of music that comes out of Detroit, right? Or Detroit
Yeah.
artists. So like, because it's a very different style to say the least.
Yeah.
So hearing this, it was something that made me say like, yo, I've listened to Boldy James before. I've listened to him since Mikey Rocks, since he was on the Mikey Rocks mixtapes back in the day, like in the early 2010s, and seeing how far he's grown, because I wasn't the biggest fan of him back then, but seeing how far he's grown since then, it lets me know like, hey, there's something special here. And then he would come out. I think he put out 2 more albums this year, so putting out 2 more albums for the year, coming up with a total of 3 albums, and eventually becoming the Griselda signee, kind of let us know, like, just in terms of what this album meant in terms of the eyes watching. Because you have the songs, like you have songs where he does something with I think Benny the Butcher on here, Freddie Gibbs, which kind of all fit that pocket, and as well as Vince Staples, which I was surprised about because we all know Vince Staples doesn't come out that often, at least anymore. So
Yeah.
yeah,
His
like I
style's
mean,
changed a lot over the years.
yeah,
At least
definitely
production, for sure.
yeah, like his production's changed a
A
lot,
hell of a lot.
since like Hell Can Wait or something like that. So like, but yeah, nonetheless though, when it came to this album, it was just a great album. Even like there's skits that are within the album, I think after Giant Slide.
I love that
Where
song, man.
yeah. I'm like honestly, I'm really surprised that this album didn't get I'm not gonna say critical acclaim, but it didn't get the deserved attention it should have gotten.
Blame COVID.
Because, huh?
Blame COVID.
I don't
No,
even know if it's COVID though. In this
yeah,
case.
I was gonna say I don't think it's COVID, bro. I just think that this year you really seen like I feel rap fans like us, we really appreciate when something good drops, but you see where certain artists has taken over the fucking game and they're not fucking good. You know what I mean? And I'm not trying to hate on the ones that the new artists that are actually good or tolerable to listen to, but there's certain artists on here that I don't feel like mentioning right now that I'm just like, yo, they're not fucking good, but they're getting all the love and shine. You know what I mean?
Well,
So
Yeah.
Here's what I'll say about that, because I mean, like, I think and me and Spence were having a conversation about this the other day, where a lot of artists, like, and I'll just say newer artists, right? To not necessarily put it on anybody's shoulders. Some of the more accepted sound is more of a alternative rap type of sound at the moment. And rap like this, where it's like more of a, I'll say 90s style of rap, because I mean that's what it's comparable to. It gets overshadowed, even though I think the quality of music is more here, in my opinion, unless you're talking about some of the more like some of the alternative rappers who are really like about it. And I'm talking about like Young Thugs and people like that, because Young Thug makes good music. You know what I mean?
shouts out to
Yeah.
Thugger, man. I
He
fuck with
does.
Thugger. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it also ties into because I just looked up some stuff with Bodie James. I think it also ties in to definitely when you look at this list that we have, I think most of the acts are older acts. Older acts in terms of age, not in terms of like them how long they've been out on the scene. Someone like Bodie James, he's like 38. Like, so like understanding how old he is, it makes sense when you look at the reflection of older rappers definitely coming out of the north. I'll say not like southern rappers, but northern rappers. You look at someone like Benny the Butcher or Griselda for that instance. They're all older. All of them are older. I think honestly, I think Bodie James might be older than everybody in Griselda. He might be the oldest person on Griselda, possibly. But I think that sound, I think a lot of that sound comes from age because you have a lot more life experience, a lot of more stories that you can tell that is less about, hey, I could talk, because I'm quite sure Bodie James can talk about the same subject matter as what's out here. Will you succeed doing it? I'm not sure. I don't think so, possibly. But when you have a life that you lived and you're now putting that your life story on music, on wax, you should expect it should be better because it's someone taking more time out. Like that's why like you get artists like Westside Gunn that puts out really good music. He understands he encompasses everything outside of just the lyricism. But like that also comes from age and understanding what you like to listen to and understanding who you're putting your music out for. So I think that had a lot to do. Well, age and experience had a lot to do with Bodie James being so being ranked as high as he is, despite the amount of coverage that he got this year. And I mean, I think in the 20s, I think we'll start seeing a shift of music going back into like those nostalgia eras of just people wanting to put lyricism first. So
One word before we leave off on this, and I'll say that I think it also just deals with the way that we digest media now. Like, if you really want something, then you can find it, and I feel like if people want to listen to a more melodic rapper, then that's there for you. But if you want, more of a rapper's rapper, like a purist, then that's there for you too. And I feel like it's one of those things where, because everything's so accessible, I'm curious to see how things fade away, and kind of how things fade away, but also how things stay around, because everything is so accessible. It's not going to be like, oh man, remember the days when this was there? It's like, no, it's always there if you're looking for it. So it's just
Right.
an interesting time period to live in as far as like life in media goes. But
Yeah.
are we ready to move on to number two?
Yep. Let's get
for
it.
All right. Number two on the
I already
list.
know what it is.
Already know what it is. We've been talking about these two albums a lot through the year, listeners. Number 2 is with 28 points,
Ooh.
Alfredo by Freddie Gibbs.
AKA album 1B.
Exactly.
Facts.
Lau,
Facts.
you
I
want to
had that as my one. Go for it.
go ahead, Lau.
I uh, this was number one before I we announced number one. This album was the fucking world heavyweight champion for the longest time.
Nothing was beating it.
Nothing was beating it. This got, for the listeners, I've became a real like vinyl collector starting this year. Shouts out to, my guys, Nigel Spence. They put me onto the shit. And this album was one of the albums where I'm like, I must have this on vinyl. And this album is 10 songs of like, look, there's nothing to skip. There's nothing to be like, yo, this song is whack. If somebody came to, I don't give a fuck if you're a fan of Lil Uzi and the bullshit autotune niggas today. If you came to me and said Alfredo was whack, we're gonna have a fucking argument. It's like that with me, man. I'm sorry. This album, it's easily one of the best fucking rap albums. I think if you did a top 10 albums across all genres, this would be in there somewhere.
Has to be.
Has to be, hands down.
Yeah. Yeah, it absolutely has to. I mean, I think this album, I agree, it was an album of the year to me. It was definitely my number one. The context of listening to this album throughout the year, and granted, granted the advantage the album has is it's been out a little longer than others, right? But it was one of those albums that, like, granted, because of COVID, we're not outside as much, so you can't. The turn up music's not just going to be there. Like, it's not going to hit like it did. So listening to an album like this, I was able to actually live with it. Hopping in the car, go somewhere, I'm putting it on. I'm out somewhere eating, going to a restaurant or whatever. I might listen to it before I walk in or whatever the case may be. And you realize how this album it molds and contours to whatever you're doing for the most part, right? He's rapping, but in the same breath, he's rapping to you, but it's in aggressive but slightly chilled way, where it's like, yo, this is my content. This is what I'm talking to you about, but we got it under beats that's hella laid back. We're chilling. You having a good time. It ties into what you were saying earlier this year, Lau, when it came to like the videos that he shoots, where it's like this Pablo Escobar image. The music, I feel as though, illustrates that. Yeah. At its core, this music is able to illustrate that. And you play it back, and it's like, I've played this album so many times, and you just ask yourself, is it possible that this album can be defeated? This shit was like the final boss of any game that you cannot fucking beat at the end of the day. Like this granted, it did become number 2 because of the pointing system that we chose on. But man, listen, I think I ain't even gonna say that. I'll say this though, like hearing what he put out, I think it's without question that Freddie Gibbs may be like one of the best artists granted, he's number 2 in terms of albums, but I think for me, he may end up being like, if not the best artist of the year, he may be one of the best artists. And he put out one project. That says a lot in itself when you have multiple artists. Some of these artists, not just Westside Gunn, there's other artists within this top 10 that have put out multiple projects this year. Or if they haven't, because of when we're recording, they're leaning to putting something out and pretty soon before the year wraps up. And like I said, if you put out one album and it's just collectively good and great, you don't have to put out anything else. And the shit stands alone. And that's why this album, it can be argued to be, instead of 2, it is 1B, if not 1A for some people. So
yeah, yep.
For me, it's one of the things where like I listen to it and there might be a couple songs that when I listen to it all the way through, I just don't feel like listening to, but it's not because they're bad songs. Like it's hold on. It's like one of the best albums that I've heard in a long time. Shouts out to Alchemist and shouts out to Freddie Gibbs because Freddie Gibbs on here rapping. Tyler Creator really did his thing on something to rap about. One of my favorite songs of the year, easily. Conway on Babies and Fools, one of my favorite songs of the year, easily. Baby Shit, one of my favorite songs of the year, easily. Fucking damn,
That's
what's the
the
name?
album, man.
Benny the Butcher was the name. Frank Lucas, one
Frank
of my
Lucas.
favorite songs of the year. That might be the hardest beat of the year, easily. So it's one of those things where I'm just like, I listen to it and it's hard for me to not really appreciate as to what it is and, look at it and say, damn, like I really just like this album a lot. I've listened to it a hell of a lot of times. I bought it on vinyl, got the fucking limited edition shit, you know what I mean? Just cause like I'm like that. So it is what it is.
It's a good choice, though. It definitely was a good choice.
One question I'll ask y'all before we move on from here is with the price of tea in China and Alfredo being number 2 and 3, is this saying that Alchemist had the better year between him and Hit Boy?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't even think there's much to
Just have to say.
elaborate on. Yeah, it's just yes. Like you look at, I mean, shit. If we look at the ranking that we have, he's produced at least 75% of this whole list.
Yeah.
In comparison to, granted, I had Hit Boy being number 1 at one point in time, but it wasn't until I revisited half this list of artists that came out this year that I'm like, yo, Alchemist is that guy. He is the guy that won. He's the guy. He is the king this year when it comes to production. Now, what does that mean next year? Who knows? But as of right now, he's pretty much hot as thunder. So
I
yeah,
agree.
so like, quick question though, actually, before we move on. So like with Freddie Gibbs, right? With this being us establishing that this is either 1A or 1A or 1B, or we'll just say 2 for lack of better terms. Because of 2020 and because of COVID-19, there was a lot of things that we weren't able to embody because of being in the house. And we don't know what that come next year. But if in the likelihood that in the hope that let's say early next year we go back to somewhat of a normal, what do you think that means for Freddie Gibbs? Do you think Freddie Gibbs may end up just saying like, yo, let's go back and run this album through and just push it again? Or do you think well, let me say this. Are you expecting another album from Freddie Gibbs next year? Or do you think he should just run with this project and keep pushing it?
I think I wouldn't be surprised if he did a tour off the strength of this album, but I could see him doing another album next year though. Because I mean, it seemed like he already started working on another project. You know what I mean? He released that song with Big Sean, blah blah blah. So like I said, if things do become normal because the virus goes away, I could see him definitely doing a tour. Like, hey, I'm doing a tour for the Alfredo tour. Let's just call it that. But he's really working on another album at the same time.
Yeah, I see him going on tour and I'll be there because I mean, like, I think if you go to shows a lot, one thing that I can say since I've started going to shows and shit like that is if you like an artist, it's cool if you go to a show to see an artist. But what's even cooler is when you go and you like their album because you're going to hear
Yes.
all the songs from their album and you're going to hear maybe some other songs on the side. But it's like you don't want to go for maybe they're not your favorite album of the artist and hear all the songs from that album, but then hear maybe some of the hits that you like. So if Freddie Gibbs goes on tour next year, I'll be there. And I think he'll put out a next album relatively soon, whether it be next year or the year after that. I don't think it's going to take too long for him.
Yeah, I mean, I think I do agree. I think he will probably go on a tour. The goal, like you said, when you go on a tour when you go to a show as a person that loves concerts, is that of actually listening to the music. I do think Freddie Gibbs. I'm hoping Freddie Gibbs doesn't put out another album next year. I'll be honest, because I think he with something like him putting out Bandana last year, which was a phenomenal project, and then putting out this Alfredo, which is even more phenomenal project, if that even sounds right grammatically. Um, it's one of those things where I hate when artists, or I hate sometimes I believe like an artist should, instead of putting out something new, they should just push what they have. And I think he's done a great job at that now, because I think he more or less has a cult following in comparison to like the stardom of others. Definitely with him being around for so long. But I do think if he was to hold off a year or two, another year, I think we'll be able to get like just an album where, because this album is just a reflection of his life to some capacity. And I think we'll get more of that when we have when he puts out the album, tours, lives life, records, and then comes out with some more heat. Like putting out another album, if he puts out another great album next year, we won't even talk about Alfredo like that. So
I disagree, only because Alfredo's so good. But
imagine if he puts out an album that's better than Alfredo next year.
it's possible. But I just think Alfredo kind of can live on its own. Like Pinata and Bandana kind of live on their own for me when it comes to Freddie Gibbs. Like in my mind, he has 3 classics like already. So it's
he has a trilogy.
Yeah, but so we are at number 1. The final pick, and it beat out. Speaking of 1A, 1B, it beat out Alfredo by literally 1 point, 28-29. We all know what it is because we all been raving about this album for all year long, or since it came out. Burden of Proof by Benny the Butcher. Surprise, surprise. It's the best album that came out this year, in my opinion. To me, Benny the Butcher and just Hit Boy, they really did their thing, man. Like, it's, whenever I listen to the album, I go back and I listen through it, and I'm just like, is this a bad song? Like, is this a skippable song? And I'm just like, no. Like, every time I listen to it, I'm just like, I don't have to skip it. I can listen to it all the way through and not have a problem. I spent multiple days in the gym working out to the shit. I spent multiple car rides just listening to this shit because it's so fucking good. Like, it's just one of those things where Benny the Butcher, his lyricism is on point. The beat making is on point. Fucking Freddie Gibbs is on this album too. His little small verse is pretty dope. And the other features on there are dope as well. Like, there's nothing bad I have to say about this album. The album length is good. Everything about it is good. I think if you're a fan of music, you should listen to this album.
Yes, I agree wholeheartedly, Nigel. If Alfredo was Hulk Hogan in his fucking prime, then this album is like The Rock when he's in his prime. You know what I mean? Hulk Hogan was big in the fucking 80s, crossover guy. The Rock, big in the 90s, early 2000s, crossover guy. You know what I mean? They're great. That's why I was like, 1A, 1B, depending on what you really think. Now, with this album, I think if this album dropped in the early 2000s, this album would have went platinum. I think so. But with the climate that it is now, it didn't get its recognition because of the market of the rap game today. And I felt like, if you like rap music and you're a real rap fan, this album, you don't have to say this is your album of the year, because everybody is subjective to that. But if you're like, this is not one of the top albums you listen to, I'm gonna be like, dude, are you really a rap fan, or are you just a trendy nigga? Because this album is the shit. I feel like I could listen to this album 15 years ago. I could listen to this album now. And that's the vibe that it gets me. And it blew me away. Hit Boy did do his thing on this shit. You know what I mean? Like, it was a great tandem. Benny and him, man, they did their thing. They really did their thing. And I have nothing bad to say about the album. I could rave about the album for the next 20 minutes. I'm not going to do that. But I feel like, hey, guys, if people who really listen to rap music, you know what I mean? No matter if you're a fan of the new shit or not, listen to this album. This is a top album. yes, for our point system, we put number one. But for somebody like, for example, Spencer might have been like, "Hey, this is my number two. This is my 1B." But it's like an interchangeable thing. This album is the shit. This you got to listen to this. If you don't, your mom might get smacked.
Jeez, talk about aggressive. I mean, it was good enough you could slap your mama, right? But like, it to me, I put it at number two because there were some things I didn't care for from the album. Primarily, it's just I didn't like how the album ended because, like I said, I'm really big into albums being more of a story, and I didn't get that from this album. But overall, when it came to lyricism and raising the bar for artists, raising the bar for your features, I think Benny the Butcher was probably the artist that did it the best this year. When we listen to, and we know how Lil Wayne, don't get me wrong, Wayne can rap, and we know, but Wayne is here and there. He did a song with Lil Wayne, Timeless with Lil Wayne and Big Sean, where you could tell the fact that they knew they were doing a song with Benny the Butcher, they had to bring nothing short of their A game, if not better than that. So I think that's a testament within itself. But when it came to the album overall, I do know some people that didn't care for it just because of whatever their reasons, and I can understand it for some. I think with Benny the Butcher, I think his career from listening to this album, I think his career is going to take off immensely next year. But I think it's going to be more from him living a little bit more. Because I think the only issue I ever heard from people were just like, someone tell me I'm a huge hip hop fan, but he tells a similar story than what they've heard because of like a lot of drug dealing, right? But in the same breath, like this album it's as complete as you can get for the level of MC that we've had this year. I can say that, and it definitely superseded what I thought. It superseded what I thought he would put out. I'll say that. I can definitely say that from listening to the features X, Y, and Z to this point now. It's like, yo, you did a lot better than what I would expect, because I was expecting something along the lines of like Tana Talk 4. Which would have been like, this would have been like Tana Talk 4 or something. But this was just a totally different vibe. Very well. It was smoothing out because I wasn't sure what he would do with someone like Hit Boy, for instance, just because he's not like Harry Ford or any of these type of artists. But he did his job overall. I can definitely say that.
And we can speak about like Hit Boy and the way he produced for this album. You know what I mean? Because I would say that definitely in comparison to some of the things we've heard Benny the Butcher on in the past, compared to the way this sounds, he did a good job of mixing that like old rugged sound with like also some newer elements. And I really appreciated that, especially for Benny the Butcher, because like I think one of the things you can say about Griselda is that a lot of their beats sound, similar. I don't want to say similar, but they come from the same ilk, is what I'll say. And me personally, like I thought it was interesting to hear him like really just kind of taking off and really doing his thing with another producer on what we've deemed designer tapes on this podcast now. So like it's one of those things where I guess I just really enjoyed it. Like I don't really have anything bad to say about it. And I think that's where it really comes down to it for me as far as putting it as my number one. It's the amount of negatives and cons I have to say are like very minimal.
I think I saw some criticism to this album, right? Because album is perfect, how much of we may like it or not.
Of course.
But one of the criticism I saw of this album, besides, what Spence said about like, oh, it's heavy drug talk, which, those people can just jerk off. I think that one of the criticisms I saw was like, oh, the beats are not grimy. They're too fucking modern. And I feel like some of the criticism are kind of lame. And I feel like it's just an excuse of like, hey, I like the heavy auto-tune nigga that talks about, what do you mean?
Well, to me, go finish it though.
No, I'm not saying that that's, I'm not saying that's for everybody, but I'm just talking about like, I'm generalizing from like reading like the comments and shit like that of what people think. You know what I mean? Like, so
Yeah.
for example, when the Tubby Man posts an album, he's not posting Benny the Butcher. You know what I mean? He's only posting, a artist that none of us are talking about. That's what he's posting. And you'll see people in the comments be like, this is GOAT Symbols album of the year. How can this not be nominated for this?
Right.
But if the Tubby Man happens to post something out of his element, like when he posted Alfredo, the comments will be like, who? Oh, this is old shit for old heads. All sorts of like crazy comments. You know what I mean? I'm not
Right.
talking about somebody you personally know, Spence, that you could
Nah.
vouch for their taste. I'm just
Yeah.
talking about like, the fat chubby kid that lives in the suburbs and he pretends that he's really out on O Block. You know what I mean? I'm talking about those people.
I have.
I
So
got you.
Go ahead.
and so I feel like the criticism of this album from the general consensus, I feel like it's lame, nothing credible to go by off at all. I feel like when you listen to this album, you could really feel what he's saying. None of us on this podcast are crack dealers, and none of us sold drugs. So I'm gonna put that out there,
You don't know
right? Okay, outside of Nigel, I guess, but but like we could be. I feel like okay, like I believe this nigga did this shit. The way he's rapping, the way I feel like he put it in the song. You know what I mean? And you could. It's public knowledge. He got locked up for the shit, so you could look that shit up. But I'm just saying, like, I just don't know how you could be like, yo, this album's garbage. This is for an old head. This is blah blah blah. Like I really have to question your music taste. But like, bro, like, it's either are you a fan of rap music or are you a fan of, what's really trending?
I'm it. Yeah, I guess you could say that. I
I
don't agree
had.
necessarily, but yeah, you could say that.
I told somebody that Burden of Proof was probably my album of the year, and she laughed at me. She was very adamant that Alfredo was album of the year. I didn't disagree with her because
Oh, well, I mean that see, but I'm not mad at that.
I'm not mad at it either.
Because they chose something that's credible.
Exactly.
Now if she was like, oh, motherfucking you know, damn, I don't want to shit on niggas, but like, oh, Lil Top, that was album of the year, or whatever. Top, I'm looking at it. I'm gonna look at them and be like, bro,
Was that an actual rapper?
no, it's not
Okay.
a rapper.
I was like, I've never heard of that dude ever in my life. Wow, that's crazy.
It's an album of a very popular rapper.
Oh,
right,
okay.
right now, and I'll be looking at that person and I'm like, bruh, like, you smoking cancer sticks. I can tell because you mentioned it.
Well, do we have anything else to say? I'm pretty sure, this end of the year, project of the year extravaganza thing that we did, like, I think I'm pretty satisfied by what we came up with. I think, our taste kind of showed. And it's kind of what I expected, but also towards the bottom half, I would say like 7 through 4. That was kind of interesting. But I mean, do y'all have any takes from what we did before we close this out?
I'm overall, I would say I'm pleased with the list. I know it didn't necessarily reflect. I know the list didn't necessarily reflect each of our own individual lists, but I think it was somewhat close to some extent or within a ballpark of. So, I mean, I think the way we did it was pretty concise, and I think I'm very interested to see what's going to come from some of these artists next. Well, all these artists next year, because I think because of 2020, a lot of these artists didn't get the proper shine they deserve just because of the inability to be out. So I'm very curious to see what'll happen with these artists next year, especially.
And I want to say, like, for the listeners, like, even though that we like after listening to our top albums in a year, we like rappers who fucking rap more than they don't. That doesn't mean that we won't listen to other shit. You know what I mean? Like I would say, like, we understand the balance and we could separate entertainment from, bullshit or whatever like that. We could separate reality from fantasy. So like we're definitely listen to more shit outside of this. But if we're talking about like critique and credibility and all that, this is what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, and I'll say I'll agree with that because I heard that Balenci was like one of the best lyrics of the year. Danny Brown said that, and it's one of those things where like no, I actually enjoyed that song and "You Better Move" by Lil Uzi. So I mean, like we all understand that like look like this is our top albums, the best albums that came out, but not necessarily like that we didn't enjoy anything else. But with that being said, follow us at Advise Highly on Twitter, the Highly Advised Podcast on Instagram. Um, you've been highly advised. Thank you for listening to us. Give us your top 10 albums in the comments, and we will see you later on. Have a good one.
You've been highly advised.